I like to cut felt on my Cricut Maker 3 with the rotary blade. It's the best method I've found to add a design to Design Space one that I imported my own pattern. I upload it and then ungroup it and then choose whichever petals I want to cut. Now today I'm just doing this fancy like lily petal. It's a bonus petal included in the spring bouquet, and I add it to my canvas and then I go ahead and duplicate it. I'm going to use it 6 times, so I just do 6 project copies and apply, and I know I can get them to fit all on one row if I adjust it. So I just go ahead and adjust it now, kind of rotate and squeeze it in so that I can use less felt and get these 6 petals I need for the flower all to fit on the canvas. So I'm just messing around and using that rotate button in the corner to flip things around and kind of squeeze it in. Then I push continue once I'm happy with how it's laid out on the mat. And this is where I'll go to the next screen to select the type of material that I want to use. Now I'm using wool blend felt, so I choose felt wool fabric and change it to rotary blade. Now no matter what kind of felt I'm using, I like to use the rotary blade setting. My favorite way to put felt on the mat, I have a full sheet here. I just lay it on top of the mat, even though I will not need this much. You could go ahead and cut it, but this is just easy and fast for me. So I just laid the felt on the mat. I like to use the purple mat, load it, and then go back and wait for everything, and then I can just push play. Now this is where it kind of measures the mat to see how long it is. I realized my Cricut was a little bit close to my blind, so I scooted it out a little bit, and once it's ready to go, then that play button will blink and I just touch that and it starts cutting. So the rotary blade does a really good job of cutting the felt really clean and smooth. I am super happy with the quality of this, and it just makes it so much faster for me to get to the fun part. I personally love using a machine to cut petals for my for my felt flower making rather than hand cutting. But hand cutting is great too if you don't have a Cricut Maker 3. But with the rotary blade, I really like how this works. You can also use a Cricut Maker. I just have a Maker 3 in this video, but a regular Maker works great too with the rotary blade. That is the key. Once everything's done cutting, I just pull the felt off the mat. I do not find that my felt gets fuzzy. It comes really clean off the mat and the quality stays really nice on both sides. So I don't have any trouble with the felt sticking to the mat or it getting fuzzy. Now you will see there's a little bit of fuzz left behind on the mat. That doesn't affect the quality of the leaf for me or petal. And what I do is I just use a baby wipe or some soap and water and clean that off. But at this point, even with the little bit of felt left behind on the mat, it's still sticky and I'm still able to use it several more times. So once I realize that the mat is less sticky and needs to be cleaned, I do that. For the felt that's left, I just cut real close to where I cut the petals out, and then just put that with my scraps, and then this I can just fold up and use for my next project. So to make this lily, I'm starting with the center, and I have an 18 gauge floral wire and a little strip of felt. This strip of felt is about 2 inches long and about half an inch or quarter of an inch wide. So I just fold that wire right into the middle, and then once it's folded over, I can trim off the sides, because really I'm just covering this middle wire with a little bit of felt to get the center strip for this flower. Now you can do this several times you can wrap like a 22 gauge wire around with more of this style of stamen for the center of the flower. But I wanted to go ahead and use this faux stamen that I had. So I am just going to glue this around the center, and this is just kind of an organic fun look. It doesn't have to be perfect. I went ahead and cut these, and then I'll just put some hot glue around the center felt and apply these little faux stamen. I thought the color was fun, and it added just a little bit different texture for the center of this lily. But, there's always different kinds of centers you can do for whatever materials you have and whatever you're going for. So I do like to, look at a real lily, for example, and use that for inspiration. But I always give myself room for creative freedom to just do what I think sounds fun and looks cute and looks, like the style I want. So I like to play around with things and try new techniques also as I make felt flowers. So at this point, we're ready to start adding the petals around the center. And I thought it would be fun to try and do some shading. So I pulled out my eyeshadow. This is just NYX Brights like eyeshadow palette. And I'm using a little makeup brush here. And this is just going to give a little bit of depth and dimension. It's kind of hard to pick it up on the camera, but in person, it just kind of adds a little depth to that dark red felt with some bright or red accents. So I just use this little makeup brush to apply that eyeshadow and shade the petals. And you can seal this with hairspray after you're done, or like a fixative craft spray. I ended up not doing anything to seal it. I don't really worry too much about that and find that it stays pretty well on there, especially since, once the flowers are made, we don't necessarily handle them a lot. This is going in a bouquet, so after I add the shading, I am going to put the wire down the center of each of the 6 petals. So I do a thin strip of hot glue using my Sure Bonder detail tip hot glue gun, lay a 20 gauge wire down the center, and this wire is just a little bit longer than the petal. And I just fold it in half and let that dry, and I'll open it back up and add a little bit more glue if I need more glue, because a lot of times that wire will be kind of showing a little bit, which isn't a problem because you can just open it up and stick your detail tip hot glue gun down in there and add just a tiny bit of glue. Now this darker felt is harder to work with as far as glue. It does show, hot glue can show up on that red felt a lot easier than like a lighter felt, but it is such a pretty color, so it's worth the extra effort. And if you feel like you have a little bit of glue showing, you can just use some scissors or some shading to cover it up. So I just repeat that process, strip of hot glue, lay the 20 gauge wire on top, fold and open it up, check it if you want to, or you can come back later and just trim that tip off with some scissors, and you're good to go. You're going to have this really cool wire in the middle of each petal, which will allow us to shape the lily back and bend it. And it's just a really pretty elegant look for this fancy lily flower. So once we've got those all ready to go, we are going to trim off the bottom just with some little wire cutters, trim off the wire that's sticking out, and then trim off the edge to get a straight edge. And then we are going to add these to the center. Okay, so I'm just cutting and gluing and applying that to the center. For each of these petals, I do 3 around the center for the middle. And I'm just kind of evenly placing these around the center. And then I will go back and do the next 3 and just fill those in the gaps here. Okay, so once I have that first layer, I'll come back and put some hot glue and then apply that in between where the first 2 petals are. So lay it right there in that gap and fill it in to where we have 3 layers or 3 petals on the first layer and 3 petals on the second layer. And then we can just kind of bend our petals however we want, do some quality control, check for any glue that might be showing. And I like to add this little flower back or leaf back to the flower to cover up anything that, I don't want showing, just to give that finished look. We just do that by applying glue to those 4 corners and bending them up and around and just pushing those in and trimming off any excess felt if we need to. Where the ridges kind of meet, you can trim off some felt and just make sure everything looks nice and clean and finished out. And then we can just style our lily however we want to for our fall decor.